All right, so if you're watching this video, chances are you are doing some research for a Katana 1000 or the GSX S variants. And I want to talk specifically about some of the annoying characteristics about this particular motorcycle, the Katana. I don't really want to get too deep into aesthetic or ergonomic changes. I have installed a Moto Dynamics DRL blinker conversion, the different handlebars, the tail tidy, and remove that rear bumper thing. But none of that made a difference in terms of rideability. I want to talk about the things that I will be doing to this bike to improve upon the generic rideability and how this bike gets down the road. Make some improvements there that I think might help you as well. So let's start at the back of the bike. We're already here. This motorcycle comes with 17-tooth front sprocket, 44 rear sprocket gearing from the factory. This whole bike, by the way, is based on a 2005 GSX-R 1000, the frame, the engine, and the swing arm. So the 1744 setup was a popular upgrade for this particular setup back in the day. It would help that bike accelerate a little bit better. But this particular bit of kit, well, it's got different camshafts in a different tune that is geared more towards upper mid-range as opposed to the GSX-R 1000's top-end rush. This bike still makes a ton of power, but it's making better mid-range throughout. So I think that a little bit different gearing would do this bike well. It can be a little bit buzzy at high highway speeds, say 90 to 105 miles per hour. It can become a little bit buzzy. I think that a move to a 1742 setup, the way that it came from the factory originally back in 2005, might be a little bit better, especially if you're planning on doing any long distances with any of your GSX S variants. It'll bring that RPM down a little bit and not be as hand numbing as this thing can be if you're rocking that type of speed for any real length of time. And there's another option though, and this is the option that I'm going to go with. I'm going to leave the factory gearing. I will be moving to a 190/55 rear tire. From the factory, these things come with a 190/50. Most leader class bikes nowadays come with a 190/55. It aids in transitioning, and it will, with the factory gearing, help to lower the RPM going down the freeway. You won't see it on the speedometer, but your perceived speed to RPM is going to be slightly lower, and it'll split the difference between the 42-tooth rear sprocket and the 44 rather that this comes with from the factory. So there's that to consider if you're wanting to do that with one of these bikes. The main thing I got to tell you is the transition. It's going to transition so much more sporty with that 190/55. The 55 series tires are just known for that. Next, battery placement is in the worst spot on this motorcycle. It is right under where the pillion would sit, as far away from the center mass, I think, as you can possibly get. Yeah, that's kind of an odd thing. So you've got an extra 8 to 10 pounds of lead acid battery sitting right as far away from optimal as you can get. I will be moving to a lithium ferrous battery. Very, very safe. Some manufacturers are actually now coming with lithium batteries, and that's the type of battery they go with. Just make sure if you're ever going to keep one on a tender that you use the correct tender so that you don't damage the battery. Okay, getting back to the engine on this thing. Yes, it is the K5 GSX-R 1000 engine. Slightly different cams, but it's the tune. Guys, I got to tell you, there's two things that are really nitpicky for me about this bike. One is it's got a flat spot at any RPM input up to about 7,500 RPM. Most of that is in the tune, but part of that is in the throttle tube. At some point, the earlier models were deemed to have too snappy or too twitchy of a throttle. And so what Suzuki did is they changed the cam in the throttle to be much less aggressive at lower throttle inputs. Up to about half throttle, it was very sedate, and then it would ramp up to what the older GSX-R 1000 rate was. Well, the problem with that is for a motorcycle like this, you've got nannies that are holding you back through the mid-range where this engine was presumably tuned for, and you've got a throttle tube that's also holding you back. What it meant was you had a very long throttle throw on this motorcycle. I went with a stock GSXR 1000 throttle tube. If you don't plan on getting the bike tuned, go with that throttle tube. If you do plan on getting the bike tuned, still go with that throttle tube. I think you'll be a lot happier with it. At least my opinion and my idea of how a bike should respond. All of that, it's coming straight from the throttle itself, and having a linear throttle tube to me just makes a lot more sense. But a tune, yeah, this one's definitely gonna get a tune and an air filter. Next on the list, I went with a set of ASV levers for this bike. So the main reason for that, the clutch lever is not adjustable. I would prefer to have as much adjustability as I can possibly get. The brake lever, same thing. I wanted a matched set, and so ASV does make a set of levers that will work with the Katana. I've worked with this company specifically on Katana levers. The clutch lever, you're never going to have an issue finding fitment. The brake levers, though, can be a little bit different because of the master cylinder plunger. As long as they know you've got a Katana, though, they now know the right barrel. And if you're into this already, I'm already talking above your head. If you're not in the know, these bikes are a little bit different than the GSX S models. And so what you think might work when you're buying parts online for a generic GSX S, you got to make sure it's going to work with a Katana. That's what we did with those levers. They offer up a ton of adjustability, and they look good too. So anyway, a bit of an ergonomic thing. I know I said I wasn't going to hammer too hard on that, but in this case, just know that if you are getting levers, there are some inconsistencies between the two bikes. All right, last but not least, that is a factory optional fly screen. I highly recommend getting that. For cruising down the highway, I'll tell you what, it makes all the difference in the world, keeping quite a bit of wind off of you. It doesn't seem like it would. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on there, but every little bit helps. And at highway cruise speeds, at flat out acting stupid speeds, this thing has really impressed me with how it moves air around. That's how it looks. And it is supposed to mount as it does with the factory deflector right behind it. But that is a factory piece. That is not aftermarket. So guys, just to recap, gearing or tire size, get a lighter battery, do something about the tune, do yourself a favor, get a different throttle tube, and absolutely get a different fly screen put on the front, or at least try to find the factory fly screen for this thing so you're not getting shook all over the place. It is still a sport naked, I suppose, after all. One thing I will say, though, is this partial fairing does a phenomenal job of blowing wind around you, much better than the S model. So there's that. But guys, everything else on this motorcycle performs flawlessly. The brakes are great. I love the top end rush of this thing. It makes great power everywhere. Just a few things that I need to change, and I think that you, if you're watching this, would probably want to make some of the same changes. But post up your comments. If you've got one of these things, let me know what you've done to it, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.